hard to believe that the Burnout series has been around for about 20 years. The very first game came out in 2001. It was developed by Criterion Games and published by Acclaim Entertainment. In fact, the first two games were published by Acclaim Entertainment, and the third game, which came out, I believe, in '04 onwards, it was all published by Electronic Arts. And basically, the entire Burnout series were basically arcade racing titles that people liked. And out of all of the Burnout games that came out within the past 20 years, a lot of people will go on record and tell you that Burnout 3, Takedown, along with Burnout Paradise, were the best games in the entire series. The most recent installment within the Burnout series that was not a remaster was the one that came out back in 2011. I think it was entitled Burnout Crash, and that game was actually one of the weaker entries within the entire series. Doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad game, but it was one of the weaker entries in the entire series. And then of course we got the remastered version of Burnout Paradise, which came out back in 2018. So that game came out 10 years after the original release of the Burnout Paradise game of 2008. And I was just sitting back and I was thinking, how fun the Burnout series was back in the day. And even though Electronic Arts, places more time and focus on further developing the Need for Speed series, I'm starting to think, whether or not they should make another Burnout game. And the thing is, as cool as Burnout was back in the day, I don't think Burnout was never as successful as the Need for Speed series was on a commercial level. And the reason I say that is because Need for Speed Underground 2, which came out back in 2004, that game reached at least 11 million copies in sales worldwide. And it was basically very popular on the PS2 and GameCube, and that's something that's really impressive, but considering how competitive it was back in the 2000s in relation to the racing genre, because you got to remember, Sony released Gran Turismo 3 and Gran Turismo 4 between 2001 and 2004, and for the most part, Gran Turismo has basically been the most popular video game series as it relates to racing genre from the 2000s onward, from like the late 90s onwards, because the original Gran Turismo game was a best-selling video game on the PS1. And then not only that, you had the rise in popularity of the Forza series, which continued throughout the teens decade after it started in the 2000s. You also had Ridge Racer, which came out, the Ridge Racer series in the 2000s. The original Ridge Racer game came out around the mid-90s. I believe it was 1994, if I'm not mistaken. And even though the Ridge Racer series began to decline in popularity during the 2000s, it was still turning heads to some extent, and people were still attracted to some of the games that came out in the 2000s in relation to the Ridge Racer series. But as far as Burnout is concerned, Burnout, I feel like, is a game that if EA made a new installment that came out within the next couple of years or so, it's something that people would check out, and it would probably hit at least 1,000 copies in terms of sales worldwide. But seeing how poorly Burnout crashed down a commercial level, a lot of people are under the impression that EA just completely gave up on the series altogether, and some people have it in their mind that arcade racers are just obsolete because people like realism and all that stuff in racing games today, which is true to some extent, because I believe next year we're supposed to be getting Gran Turismo 7, and that's a game a lot of people are looking forward to. And I'm pretty sure that game will most likely do better than Gran Turismo Sport. And not to say that Gran Turismo Sport was, a bad game. It was actually a really good game, but I don't think it was on the same level of popularity as some of the earlier installments within the Gran Turismo series. But as far as Electronic Arts possibly releasing another Burnout game in the future, I have no idea whether or not that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but since, this year is actually the 20-year anniversary of the series, I would be surprised if they didn't do anything special with Burnout aside from another remaster. I mean, there's no point on remastering Burnout Crash, and honestly, the Burnout 3 game from 2004 should have been remastered for the PS3 or the PS4 or some type of next-gen console following the PS2, but it never happened, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem like EA is going to do too much with the Burnout series.